The Global Political Landscape, The Lost World, Series 1. Namaste. Radio is a channel interested in political and general affairs as they arise in the course of our life. Journey of Radio starts today with our first episode creating the foundation in the area with a discourse covering the paradigm and perspective of the current global political landscape. Center can't hold is how the world appears today. Shifting alliances, flux a geopolitical chaos, if the color of the era we are in. The Lost World, as we find it, invites a multicolored discussion with a focus on the perspective and the paradigm. Guide in the journey is Dr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Center can't hold. The globe is flinging apart in a chaotic turbulence. How do we read it?
History is a cyclical flow of times where center can hold and times where center cannot hold. When the center which is holding cohesively the world around it, that center starts eroding from inside, hollowing out. That is where the chaos starts. And usually it is between two centers holding from the center. It is like one political power, if it starts fading away and the new one is yet to come, in between you have this chaos. So in the Cold War last century, much of the last century, the Cold War, we had USA and Russia, and the world was divided into two camps. There was conflict, but no chaos. Because there were two centers which were holding the world around them. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, we had only US. And now that center is hollowing from inside.
Right.
And alternative centers like China or India are yet not there to replace it. The transitional space is where the chaos is. And this chaotic world looks more and more like the world before World War I. In a generic sense. Of course, the outside is very different. The weapons are different, the technology is different, but from an alliance and instability point of view, it is a world without belief. And it's world without predictability and certainty. It's world without reliability and dependability. It's a world where you say, he is my this week's best friend. In that kind of a world where alliances, beliefs are not enduring, because you need belief to bring about some coherence. Self-interest it's very difficult for self-interest to ensure stability and predictability. So you need some sort of belief either in the masses at large or at the center which is holding power, for some sort of predictability and reliability to be there. What we see now is the hollowing out of the power that is USA, and simultaneously we see the crisis of ideology. Because as a species, we all need a clear direction of where to go. We need a vision, we need a program, we need a project. Very few people can live spontaneously moment to moment. Sorry?
A definite path.
Yeah, we need a definite path. Very few people can live spontaneously moment to moment and not be disturbed about it. So this brings about a clarity of ideology, and we are in a crisis of ideology. Last century saw ideologies of capitalism, of communism, of feminism, and all of these isms have not stood the test of time. And it's so complicated a landscape that we have not produced philosophers good enough to conjure up or to discover a new vision. So envisioning a vision is a key difficulty which present-day intellectuals have not been able to address. And this creates a crisis of ideology. And this crisis of ideology is one of the key elements in hollowing out of the predictability of the world. So we see the world, which seems like a world which is lost somewhere, partly into itself, partly into a directionless movement, partly not knowing what to do, what to believe in. And usually, this hollowing out of the center happens either because of a demographic reason, or because of a belief reason, or because of some catastrophic eventuality. What we have now today is a demographic crisis and an ideological crisis. And this has led to a situation where the world seems completely lost. It's like a leaf in the wind situation. No one knows who is going where and what is going to happen next month or next year. And this chaos and this turbulence and this flux is what makes the world even more dangerous, not only lost, but more dangerous because it's a nuclear world, which is in the leaf in the wind situation. So add to it the jihadi problem and the woke problem, and the whole cauldron seems to be boiling. That is where we actually are. In fact, I'm reminded of a statement by Will Durant. At the end of the First World War, he said, I think somewhere around that time, he made this statement. He said, the world's a sullen mood of pensive depression broods over the earth. The world situation is fouled up. It has always been fouled up. I see no reason for change. Now, he is one of the pessimists. He is not one of the evolutionary philosophers where we are moving to a good goal. But part of what he says is true, regardless of what belief you have, that a chaotic world happens every few decades in some part of the world or the other. And as a species, we have not been very good at optimizing our individual life or the collective life. So we are fumbling through history of our species. So this is how we look at the world. It's a lost world. Lost because there is no direction giving or binding belief. And no one is ready to really pay a price for values. And that brings everything to float on the oceans of self-interest, which are very turbulent and unpredictable. So that is where we are, that the ships are all flowing on unpredictable waters of self-interest, which is very fickle and at times even pathologically driven. Are you there?
Yes, sir. So the world seems lost in ideological terms, and that is an important factor in making the world what it is.
The core focus in analysis today, and also in terms of the effect, is the history of the Western civilization. So when we say the Western civilization, it's essentially driven by an Abrahamical mindset. And the Abrahamical mindset is of thinking in terms of binaries. The all good and all evil, or psychoanalysis we will call the split. And that has been the flavor. So we see three very important binaries in the Western civilization. The first ideological binary was of religion versus science. Second was of religion versus the state. The third was left versus the right. And the fourth was feminism versus the patriarchy. And all these isms have faded away. They have not been able to provide any solution which is enduring on scale. So what we have now is a situation where in the last 2.5 centuries or 3 centuries, what we call ideologically the modernity, that has taken hold. And modernity itself is an outcome of Abrahamical thinking. And modernity was largely based upon structuralism, where we said that there is a clear cause and effect, and everything comes out of a structure. Everything can be deconstructed and analyzed in terms of some pre-existing structure. When they could not analyze or understand certain phenomena in the framework of structuralism, they jumped in a archetypically Abrahamical way into his exact opposite of post-structuralism, where they said goodbye to structures. But in that goodbye, they would also say goodbye to science, because science also is structural. So instead of moving, graduating in a mature way from structuralism to open structuralism, they in fact jumped recklessly from structuralism to post-structuralism. And that is where one of the difficulties arose, because once they jumped to post-structuralism, that became the ground for wokeism. And wokeism is now bringing out the entire Western civilization, because it is actually at the root a philosophical and psychological crisis. A philosophical crisis because instead of moving to open structuralism, where the non-structural component complements structuralism, they jump to open structuralism, which says goodbye to everything that is structural. That is one component of philosophical angle. The second component is of psychological part, where we have in psychoanalysis, we say it takes a village to bring up a child. And the village has disappeared, the child is still there. So what we have is children growing up in an extremely object deficient situation around them. And this object loss, the perceived object loss, is creating pathology on a social scale. It's creating a social psychological pandemic. It's like, let us say, if vitamin D is necessary for something, and you take out vitamin D, creating factors from the population, and suddenly the whole population develops diseases which are coming from deficiency of vitamin D. So it becomes a epidemic or a pandemic on a social scale. The same is true psychologically, that you take out objects which are necessary, and in one generation, the first generation of object loss is there, then the second, then the third. So now we have the third generation of accumulating object losses. And this third generation has this fragile narcissism and the chaotic, destructive rage of a fragile narcissist. And that is where the psychological roots of wokeism are. So you have the philosophical roots and the psychological roots, and they are hollowing out the whole thing from inside. Another aspect of it is the clash of civilizations has not happened, because even that would bring some sort of predictability. And now what you have is the modernity has collapsed, the right and left has collapsed. The isms which were social in nature, like feminism, have all collapsed. And now we have a wokeism, and this is hollowing out the Western civilization. Now, because the West was the fulcrum of stability, where the stability and science was coming from, the source itself has got hollowed out from inside because of wokeism. And that is creating a trouble for rest of the world, because there is nowhere to lean on, there is no camp to belong to. And there is no belief which can actually bifurcate it, except wokeism and jihadi beliefs, which both of which are extremely problematic. So what we see today is the graduation to open structuralism not happening, and the jihadi and the woke groups hollowing out and fighting out the civilized world. And there's nothing from the end of the civilized world to resist it. One, because they don't even recognize the nature of the crisis. Two, it's an ideological crisis where intellectual failure has not allowed them to come up with a vision. So the core stabilizing thing now is to recognize this psychophilosophical challenge and to come up with the envisioning of a vision is a core difficulty, without which this chaos cannot be coalesced into some sort of coherence. This is the nature of the ideological crisis that we see, which at the root is the collapse of modernity, the failure to move to open structuralism, and to create a practical vision. And this leads to a situation of part of the world trying to go back, regressing back to the pre-modern times, which in the Islamic world becomes the jihadi regression. And in the Christian world, in the times to come, we may see a regression back to the pre-modern state of the Western world. So this is how the deeper dynamics are. Now, on the surface, we see leader X doing Y, and we see political party A doing B, and we see country A doing something to country B. We see one event happening, creating ripples, and the other event happening, and how the countries are managing themselves. So these specifics are, of course, there at the top. But much deeper than that are these foundational issues, which are at the root of the geopolitical landscape and the geopolitical challenge. And on the surface, of course, we have everyday day-to-day events which we all have to manage, or the governments have to manage. So this is where the political situation in a deeper sense it is. Slowly we'll come to the specifics, which will be more colorful and spicy, but in the difficult and boring sense of the term, but in the truthful sense of the term, this is what is at the foundation.
It's very essential to understand where we are heading. So, coming to the evolving order, what are the core developments impending to happen? Is it already in roll?
Yeah.
Or it's not there?
It's already on the roll partly it needs a push. What is on roll are the two crusades, the woke crusade and the jihadi crusade. That's already on the roll. And we can see how they are trying to destabilize and make the world a chaotic place. We have seen regime change operations in Iraq, in Syria, recently the failed operation in Bangladesh.
Yes.
So Bangladesh is a classical regime change operation done by the deep state, which is driven by the woke jihadi ideology. But because of India's strong influence, they could not succeed there. Or they would have tried the next time in India, because India is also the next target for regime change.
Yes.
So the deep state of the US, which has tentacles in the UK and France also, it is this deep state which is trying to do the regime changes, and what we have driving them is wokeism and jihadism. So this part is already on, which is creating part of the flux and part of the problem. The second part is of the demographic crisis. The demographic crisis of China, USA, Russia, much of the Western world. The second thing which is creating turbulence in the world, because they are not able to assert themselves because of the demographic following out. The third is of the US debt and de-dollarization. As the world de-dollarizes itself, USA has the trouble because it has been walking its way to prosperity just by printing dollars. Like if you are exporting, let us say, a garment to USA, you have to do so much work right from the cotton stage to the garmenting stage to make that garment. All the US has to do is to print out on paper $1. So you are using natural resources, you are spoiling the environment, you are working hard.
You're exhausting.
Yeah. And all they do is printouts. So it's a printout superpower. And as the world starts realizing this and starts moving away from the dollar, the privilege of the US to print its way to prosperity, that will exhaust. And that will create a huge ripple effect as the top economy of the world that starts going down. Because
Right.
it's an unsustainable thing. You cannot keep printing without the power. Till now, they had the power not to allow anybody to move away from the dollar, especially the oil trade. So it was compulsory, almost compulsory, unofficially speaking, to trade only in terms of dollars when you buy oil. And that kept the need for dollars perpetual. As people start trading in other currencies, because the USA no longer has that military power,
Right.
the economic dominance, the de-dollarization will be a great difficulty. The third part will be of China. The Chinese from inside. That is another element to watch out to. The fourth will be of Iran. Iran is very, very interesting because the intellectuals in Iran, they have started debating about the pre-Islamic Iran. And as the Islamic rule fails, it has already failed, it's hanging on only by the military might. The day the revolution happens there, the intellectuals will by and large drive it back to the pre-Islamic Zoroastrian times. And that is a very important development yet to happen. And the last is of the Hindu Holocaust. As it gets recognized by Hindus and by others in the world, the institution of Hindu Holocaust in the Hindu mind and later on in the mind of others will create very deep and long-lasting changes, historical changes. So these are some of the factors which are the core developments, some of which have happened, like the Jihad and Woke Crusade, and some of them are yet to happen, like those of Iran and of the Hindu Holocaust. So these are at the root of very, very powerful, very potent events ready to unleash far-reaching historical changes.
So from an Indian standpoint, Iran seems to be of a special interest. Can we spend some focus on it?
It is very important because Iran is at a point where the regime has lost all its appeal and credibility. The people who rose spontaneously for an Islamic revolution, they themselves want now this revolution to end. They had enough of it. And the regime is hanging on only by the military might. What is likely to happen is by an external force or by an implosion from inside. If the regime falls, where will the Iran go? It's very important to realize this. Where will Iran go? And the way, if we look at Iranian intellectuals debating it where to go, they are more likely to go to the pre-Islamic Zoroastrian way. Now, if you look at the Zoroastrian element, the Zoroastrian element is very near to the Vedic period. In fact, if you look at ancient India and ancient Iran, there's no question that both are brothers. The only question is who is the elder brother. Zoroastrian scholars claim it is the source of the Vedic religion, and the Vedic scholars claim it is the source of the Zoroastrian religion. But either ways, Iran and India will be very close if this return to Zoroastrianism happens. Now, this brings in the question our own strategic orientation. Do we look at this long-term event, or do we look at the short-term event of managing the present regime of mullahs? Clever strategy would be to do both. formally manage the mullahs and informally have state players or non-state players, right, largely intellectual players, which are betting for and standing for those intellectuals in Iran which want a return to the pre-Islamic Zoroastrian religion, Zoroastrian culture. And this will be our long-term strategic investment done by non-state actors, informally funded by the state. So this is something which is very, very important of the Iranian developments. Now, this is a contest where how long will this present regime go on? And if a challenge to the present regime comes, can we informally help those who are challenging, who want to overthrow the present regime? So the strategic calculus with Iran is very, very important. And I feel that somehow the long-term strategic orientation is missing. We are not with those who are against the regime as much as we should be, and we can be informally with them. At least we can have groups of intellectuals talking to their intellectuals on those lines and creating a sort of an informal alliance which in future post-regime change can consolidate into a strategic pact, a strategic agreement with Iran on defense lines. And this will be welcome also by other states of the Gulf, Saudi Arabia and UAE, because the Shia terror which they feel will go away once Iran says goodbye to Shia Islam. So the Middle East will become safer, and it's in their interest. It's where the Indian long-term interest and the Sunni world long-term interest comes together.
Okay.
And this is a very important development, which I think we are not paying as much attention as much we should be. We are not taking the risk. I mean, it's too invested in the short-term thing. Maybe there are compelling reasons, but I still think we should at least start off the long-term strategic process.
So that brings us to inside of India. Will Modi era come to an end? And what are the dangers post-Modi era?
It will come to an end because it's a half glass full. It has saved RSS, it has saved Hindus, it has saved India at a very crucial time when the jihadi woke network had caught hold of the Indian elites and had started off almost a disintegration process. So in that sense, the achievements are very deep. Saving of RSS, saving of Hindus, saving of Hinduism, saving of India. But it's also a lost opportunity that the Hindu agenda could not be implemented. And part of the blame lies with Modi himself, because he himself is not in his heart on the extreme right. He is more like a Nehru with a cow. That he believes in mixed economy. He does not believe in the extreme Hindu agenda. He does not believe in reviving of ancient civilization to the measure others do. There's too much of fooling people, too much of media management. So in that sense, it's
somewhere he has shifted from the Hindutva, say he has shifted more to the secularism, and again he's back to the square one.
Yeah,
just because there is a sense of loss of vote back.
His own ambitions of emerging as a globally accepted leader, of winning the Nobel Prize and whatnot, all is this kind of ambitions actually put the Hindu agenda on the back burner. And this is the difficulty, that in that sense, it's a lost opportunity. And in that sense, the Modi era will be seen as a 3/4 glass full, but a lost opportunity to implement the Hindu agenda. It will definitely come to an end. I think the beginning of the end of the era has begun. And we have to now look at the post-Modi era. how it will shape. The unfortunate part is he has not laid the foundation for a post himself era, which any good leader should do. He should lead always, create a foundation for the post himself era. So there is a bit of stability for the moment, but the deeper opportunity has been lost. From 14 to 24, it has been a lost opportunity, lost years from a Hindu agenda implementation point of view, from fundamental changes in governance point of view, from assertion of force point of view on the global geopolitical scene. So it is definitely a lost opportunity, and the era definitely is coming to an end. The beginning of the end is starting. Are you there? So with this, we complete our first session. The first few sessions will be deeper. They might be boring, too bland and intellectual. Slowly, as we move to the specifics, we'll get into the more colorful and spicy subjects, language, descriptions, events. Hopefully, this channel radio will do what others are not doing and fill up the gap in the space of public discourse in this medium. Thank you.